Samuel sat quietly in his seat, staring out of the airplane window as the clouds floated by. His heart beat with both nervousness and hope. For months, he had been writing letters, exchanging photographs, and planning his journey to a new country. He had come through a marriage agency that connected people from different worlds. For him, this was not only about finding a wife, but also about building a new life. He dreamed of love, respect, and a future where he could finally belong. He was a man of dignity, hardworking and educated, but life back home had been difficult. He wanted to give himself a chance to start again. As the plane landed, Samuel whispered a small prayer. He adjusted his jacket, checked the tie he had carefully chosen, and brushed his shoes against the carpet before stepping out. At the arrival hall, his heart raced when he saw the family waiting with a small sign in their hands. His future bride, Claire, stood beside her parents. She looked nervous but smiled faintly when their eyes met. Samuel walked towards them, carrying his single suitcase. He bent his head slightly, showing respect. "Good evening," Samuel said softly. His voice was warm and polite. Claire nodded, but her parents' eyes told another story. They froze when they saw him clearly. Her mother's face tightened. Her father's expression shifted quickly from curiosity to something colder. For a moment, the air seemed heavy. Samuel felt it, but he tried to remain calm. He extended his hand politely, but Claire's father barely touched it before pulling his hand back. "This is Samuel," Claire whispered, trying to ease the silence. "Yes. I see," her father said, his tone flat. He turned his eyes away, as though he could not bear to look for long. Her mother adjusted her coat, her lips pressed tightly together, and her eyes carried a silent question that Samuel could read: "Why him?" The ride to their house was silent. Samuel sat in the back seat beside Claire, trying to start small conversations, but her parents gave only short replies. They did not ask about his journey, his family, or his dreams. Their silence was not just silence, it was rejection wrapped in politeness. Samuel kept looking at Claire, who looked down at her lap, avoiding his eyes. His heart sank, but he reminded himself to stay patient. When they reached the house, a large and beautifully decorated home in a quiet neighborhood, Samuel felt a mix of admiration and sadness. He had imagined being welcomed warmly, perhaps with tea or a meal, maybe even laughter. Instead, he stepped into a cold silence. Claire's mother called her aside into the kitchen, while her father sat Samuel in the living room. "You must be tired from your flight," the father said, but there was no kindness in his voice. Samuel nodded, "Yes, but I am also grateful to finally be here. It feels like a new beginning for me." The father did not answer. Instead, he excused himself and walked away. Samuel sat alone, staring at the photographs on the wall: family portraits, celebrations, smiles. He felt like a stranger in a place where he was supposed to belong. After a few minutes, Samuel heard raised voices in the kitchen. Though they were trying to keep it private, the words slipped through the door. He heard the mother's sharp tone: "We cannot let this happen. Did you see him? This is not what we agreed to. This will bring shame." Claire's voice trembled, "But he is kind. He is honest. I have been writing to him. He is not what you think." Her father's voice followed, firm and cold: "This is not possible. We cannot accept this. End it now before it goes further." Samuel sat frozen. His chest tightened, and a wave of humiliation washed over him. They had not even asked who he was as a person, what he had achieved, or what his heart carried. To them, his skin was enough to decide his worth. The kitchen door opened, and Claire stepped out. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with sadness. She sat across from Samuel, unable to meet his gaze. After a pause, she spoke softly: "Samuel, I am so sorry. My parents are not ready to accept you. They say it will not work. They want me to end this arrangement. Samuel looked at her, his voice steady though his heart was breaking. Claire, I came here because I believed in us. I respected your letters, your words, your promise. But if your family cannot accept me, I cannot force myself where I am not wanted. Claire's lips trembled, and she whispered, it's not fair to you. I know that. You deserve better. But I cannot fight them. Please forgive me. Samuel stood slowly, picking up his suitcase. His hands shook, but his face carried calmness. You do not need to apologize. The fault is not in me, and not in you. The fault is in the way they see. As he walked towards the door, Claire's mother appeared, her arms folded. This was a mistake, she said coldly. You should return to where you came from. Samuel turned his head slightly, his eyes calm but strong. A mistake is to judge a man without knowing his heart. Someday, you may see the truth. He stepped out into the night. The air was cold, the streets quiet. He walked with his suitcase rolling behind him, feeling the weight not just of his belongings but of rejection and loneliness. Yet inside, something told him not to bow down completely. He had dignity. He had worth. One family's blindness could not erase who he was. As he reached the corner of the street, he stopped under a lamp-post. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. He thought of his mother's words back home, Samuel, wherever you go, carry your heart with you. People may not always see your value, but never let their blindness make you forget it. He smiled faintly at the memory, even as tears pricked his eyes. He was alone in a strange country, without friends or shelter, but he had something no one could take: his faith in himself. He started walking again, the sound of his suitcase wheels echoing in the night. Somewhere in the city, life was waiting for him. The rejection at the door was only the beginning of a story that would later reveal his true worth. But for now, Samuel carried only silence, pain, and the small hope that tomorrow might bring something different. The next morning, Samuel woke up in a small guest house near the bus station. The room was plain, with peeling paint on the walls and a bed that creaked every time he moved. He stared at the ceiling for a long while, replaying the night before in his mind. He had dreamed of being welcomed into a family, of starting a new chapter filled with hope. Instead, he had been rejected before he could even show who he truly was. The memory of their cold faces stayed with him, but he refused to let bitterness take root in his heart. He got out of bed, dressed neatly in his only formal suit, and stepped out with determination. He needed to find work, a place to stay, and a way to survive. With his small suitcase in one hand and a folded resume in his pocket, Samuel walked through the city streets. The city was big, alive with cars, buses, and people rushing to work. Everything looked so different from the quiet village where he was born. He felt like a small dot in a giant picture, but he whispered to himself, I will make it. At the first company he visited, Samuel stood tall, handed his resume to the receptionist, and politely asked if there were any job openings. The woman looked him up and down, frowned, and shook her head. We're not hiring, she said quickly, even though he had seen a sign outside that read now hiring. Samuel thanked her and left, his dignity still intact. At the second place, a cafe, he offered to work as a server or cleaner. The manager glanced at him, then at the papers he carried, and said, we'll call you. Samuel knew it was just a polite way of saying no. By the time he reached the third and fourth places, the responses were the same: closed doors, fake smiles, and hidden prejudice. Each rejection felt like a small stone added to the weight he was carrying. By evening, Samuel's feet ached. He sat on a bench in a public park, his suitcase by his side, and watched families walk by, children laughing and couples sharing ice cream. His stomach growled. He had not eaten all day, saving the little money he had left. He pulled out a small packet of biscuits from his bag, broke one in half, and ate slowly, pretending it was a proper meal. That night, he went back to the guest house, but the owner reminded him gently, "You can only stay if you pay again tomorrow." Samuel counted his coins carefully. He had enough for one more night, maybe two if he skipped food. He lay down, staring at the dark ceiling, thinking of his mother's face back home. He could almost hear her voice, encouraging him to stay strong. The following days were a test of endurance. Samuel searched everywhere: construction sites, shops, offices. Most turned him away before he could even explain his skills. At one small diner, he found temporary work washing dishes. The pay was very low, but he accepted it with gratitude. He stood in the steamy kitchen, scrubbing plates and glasses until his hands were raw. At night, he returned to the guest house, exhausted, but grateful he had earned enough to eat a simple meal. Weeks passed like this. Samuel went from one odd job to another, cleaning offices after hours, unloading trucks at dawn, even sweeping floors at a shopping center. The money was barely enough, but he managed to survive. Sometimes, when there was no bed available at the guest house, he slept in a small storage room where he worked. He laid his jacket on the cold floor and used his suitcase as a pillow. He never complained, never asked for pity. People began to notice his quiet strength. A shopkeeper where he often bought bread would smile and say, "You're always so polite, young man. Don't lose hope." An elderly woman in the neighborhood once gave him a warm bowl of soup, saying, "You remind me of my son. Work hard. Things will change." These small acts of kindness gave Samuel courage to keep going. One evening, while walking home after a long shift, Samuel passed by a group of young men sitting outside a cafe. They laughed and whispered as he walked by. One of them said loudly, "Look at him, still wearing the same suit. He thought he was coming here for love, but he's just a poor fool." The others laughed. Samuel kept walking, his back straight, his steps steady. He had learned that silence could be more powerful than anger. Inside, though, his heart ached. He wondered if he had made a mistake by leaving his homeland. Yet every morning, he rose again. He polished his shoes, combed his hair, and walked out as if each day carried a new possibility. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, he would sit alone and write in a small notebook he carried. He wrote about his dreams, his plans, and his promise to himself, "One day, I will stand tall. One day, they will see me for who I am, not what I look like." There was a strength in Samuel that no rejection could break. He believed that life was more than the opinions of others. He believed in kindness, in hard work, in keeping his dignity even when no one seemed to care. He knew that the story of his life was still being written, and that every struggle was only a chapter, not the whole book. One rainy night, Samuel sat outside the diner after his shift, his jacket soaked through. He had no umbrella, no car, no warm home waiting for him. But as he looked up at the dark sky, feeling the rain wash over his face, he whispered, "I will not give up." His eyes shone with quiet determination. The city may have turned its back on him, but he believed that somewhere, somehow, his worth would be recognized. He had no idea that life was preparing something unexpected for him. He could not know that soon, a chance encounter would change everything. For now, he carried his struggles alone, surviving one day at a time. But inside him, a fire was burning, a fire that no storm of rejection could ever put out. One evening, after finishing a long day of washing dishes at the diner, Samuel stepped out into the cool night air. His body was tired, his hands sore, but his spirit remained steady. He had grown used to walking everywhere with his small suitcase, always prepared in case he lost his place to sleep. The city lights flickered around him, cars rushed past, and the sidewalks were filled with people heading home. Samuel walked slowly, thinking about how much his life had changed in only a few months. The rain had just stopped, leaving the streets wet and shining like glass under the street lamps. As Samuel walked along a quieter road, he noticed an old car parked on the side. The hood was up, and an elderly man stood beside it, looking frustrated. His suit jacket was draped over the car door, and his white shirt was already smudged with grease. Samuel slowed down and watched for a moment. Most people passed by without even glancing at the man, but Samuel's heart would not allow him to do the same. "Do you need help, sir?" Samuel asked kindly, stepping closer. The man looked up, surprised. He was in his late 60s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that still carried strength. "Yes, this old car of mine won't start," he replied with a sigh. "I've been here for half an hour, and no one has stopped to help." Samuel smiled faintly. "Let me take a look. I'm not a mechanic, but I know a little about engines." The man stepped aside, and Samuel leaned over the car. He studied the wires and pipes carefully, then adjusted a loose cable. He tried the ignition and, after a few moments, the car coughed and roared back to life. The man's eyes lit up with relief. "Well, the man said, smiling broadly. "You've saved me tonight." Samuel shook his head. "No need for thanks, sir. Kindness should not ask for a price." The man looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to read his soul. "What's your name?" he asked. "Samuel," he answered simply. "I'm Harold," the man replied, extending his hand. His grip was firm, his smile warm. "You must let me at least buy you dinner." "It's the least I can do." Samuel hesitated. He was not used to accepting such offers, but his empty stomach reminded him he hadn't eaten properly that day. He nodded politely, and Harold led him to a nearby restaurant. Over dinner, Harold studied Samuel carefully. He noticed the way Samuel spoke with respect, the way he carried himself with quiet dignity, and the honesty in his eyes. "Tell me, Samuel," Harold said after a while, "what brings you here to the city?" Samuel hesitated for a moment, then shared his story. He spoke about the journey he had made, the hopes he carried, and the rejection he faced from the family who could not see beyond his skin. He spoke of the jobs he had taken just to survive, the nights he spent without a bed, and the way he had chosen patience over anger. Harold listened without interrupting, his face thoughtful. When Samuel finished, there was a heavy silence at the table. Then Harold leaned forward. "Do you realize how much strength it takes to go through what you've been through and still speak with such grace?" Samuel lowered his eyes. "I only do what I must. I cannot let bitterness define me." Harold nodded slowly. "Most men would have given up or lost themselves in anger. But you carry yourself like a man who knows his worth, even when others don't." Samuel smiled faintly but did not answer. The dinner ended with Harold insisting on paying. As they walked outside, Harold placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "I want you to come see me tomorrow. I have an office downtown. I believe there may be something I can offer you." Samuel blinked in surprise. "An office? What kind of work?" Harold smiled mysteriously. "You'll see tomorrow. Trust me." The next morning, Samuel put on his best clothes, the same suit he had worn when he first arrived in the country. He walked to the address Harold had given him, and when he arrived, his jaw dropped. It was a tall glass building, the kind Samuel had only admired from a distance. Inside, the floors gleamed, and people in fine suits walked briskly with files and laptops. Samuel felt out of place, but he remembered Harold's words and kept walking. At the top floor, Harold was waiting. This time, he was not just an old man with a broken car. He was surrounded by assistants, and his office overlooked the city skyline. Harold was not an ordinary man, he was a millionaire businessman, respected and powerful. "Samuel," Harold said warmly, standing to greet him. "Welcome. Sit down." Samuel sat, still a little overwhelmed. "I've thought about our talk last night," Harold continued. "I've built my companies by looking for people with talent and character. Money, skills, education, those matter, yes. But what matters most is integrity, determination, and the courage to rise above challenges. And you, Samuel, have those qualities." Samuel stared, not sure if he had heard correctly. "But, sir, I'm just a worker. I wash dishes, I clean floors," Harold interrupted gently. "No. You are more than that. Those jobs only show your willingness to work hard. But your true worth is here," he said, pointing to Samuel's chest. "Your heart. Your mind. Your resilience. That is what I value." For the first time in months, Samuel felt truly seen. His throat tightened, but he managed to whisper, "Thank you, sir. Thank you for believing in me." Harold leaned back, smiling. "I don't just believe in you, Samuel. I want to give you an opportunity. Work with me. Start as an assistant in my office. Learn, grow, and prove yourself. I have a feeling you'll do more than just work, you'll inspire others." Samuel's eyes widened. It was more than he could have ever imagined. He nodded firmly, his voice steady. "I will not let you down." That night, as Samuel walked back to the guest house, the city lights seemed brighter than before. For months, he had been invisible, overlooked, and pushed aside. But one simple act of kindness, helping a stranger on the road, had opened a new door in his life. He felt a spark of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. He smiled to himself as he whispered, "Maybe this is the beginning of the change I was waiting for." What Samuel didn't know was that this encounter with Harold would not only change his own destiny, but also prove to everyone, even those who once rejected him, that true worth cannot be hidden forever. Samuel walked into Harold's office on his first day, his heart pounding but his shoulders held high. He had been given a neat desk in a corner with a computer, a phone, and a stack of documents to manage. To him, it felt like more than just a desk, it was a chance to prove himself. Many of the staff in the office looked at him curiously. They saw a man who had once looked like he belonged only in the kitchen or on the streets, now dressed in a pressed shirt, working under the direct watch of the company's millionaire owner. Some whispered, others doubted, but Samuel paid no attention. He focused on the work in front of him. The first few days were not easy. The tasks felt overwhelming at times: emails, scheduling meetings, writing reports, organizing files, but Samuel never complained. When he didn't know something, he asked politely. When he made mistakes, he stayed late to correct them. Slowly, he began to learn the rhythm of the office. What surprised many was not only how quickly he picked up the tasks, but how calmly he handled pressure. While others panicked at deadlines, Samuel stayed composed, moving step by step until the job was done. Harold noticed everything. One afternoon, he stopped by Samuel's desk. "You're doing well," he said with a smile. "But don't just focus on the small tasks. Watch, listen, and learn. Leadership is not about knowing everything, it's about paying attention." Samuel nodded, storing those words in his heart. From that day, he not only did his work but also observed how meetings were run, how deals were made, and how problems were solved. He paid attention to details that others ignored. Weeks turned into months, and Samuel's role began to grow. Harold invited him to sit quietly in meetings, at first only to take notes. Samuel listened carefully as executives discussed numbers, strategies, and new projects. When the meetings ended, Harold often asked him privately, "What did you notice?" At first, Samuel only mentioned small details: who seemed nervous, who had confidence, what ideas sounded strong. But gradually, his insights became sharper. One evening, after a long meeting about a new project, Harold leaned back in his chair and looked at Samuel. "You have a gift," he said. You see not just what people say, but what they mean. That is rare. Samuel bowed his head humbly. I only try to pay attention, sir. Before long, Harold gave Samuel more responsibility. He was asked to prepare reports, manage small teams, and even represent Harold in minor meetings. The other employees were surprised. Some were jealous, whispering that Samuel had been given opportunities too quickly. But when they worked with him, their doubts faded. He was always respectful, always fair, and always willing to help others. Samuel's reputation began to spread beyond the company walls. Clients who met him were impressed by his sincerity. They often remarked to Harold, "That young man of yours has something special." Harold would simply smile, knowing he had been right about Samuel from the very beginning. Despite his progress, Samuel never forgot the days he spent scrubbing dishes and sleeping on the floor. That memory kept him grounded. When he received his first real salary, he didn't rush to buy fine clothes or expensive items. Instead, he paid his debts at the guest house and sent money back home to his mother, writing a heartfelt letter to tell her he was finally standing on his own feet. Harold, meanwhile, treated Samuel not just as an employee but almost like family. He often invited him to his home for dinner. Harold's wife welcomed him warmly, and their grandchildren would gather around Samuel, listening to his stories with wide eyes. For the first time in years, Samuel felt the warmth of belonging. But what truly made Harold admire him even more was his humility. No matter how much respect he began to earn, Samuel never boasted. He always credited his success to hard work, faith, and the kindness of others who believed in him. One afternoon, Harold introduced Samuel at a business gathering. "This is Samuel," he told a group of influential people. "He came to this country with nothing but his dignity, and today he is one of the most valuable people in my company." Samuel felt a wave of emotion but simply bowed his head and said, "I only do what I can with the opportunities one have been given." His words were simple, but they touched everyone in the room. It was during these days that Samuel truly began to shine. He suggested ideas that improved office efficiency, saved money, and even won the company new clients. People who once looked at him with doubt now sought his advice. Some even confessed quietly, "When you first came, I didn't think you would last. But you have proved me wrong." Samuel would always answer with a smile, "Thank you. I believe every person deserves a chance." Harold was proud. He often said to his wife at night, "That young man has not only found his place, he has changed the atmosphere of this entire office." People work harder because they see him. He is a reminder that worth is not in appearance, but in character. Even outside the company, Samuel's life began to change. He moved from the small guest house into a modest apartment. He no longer had to worry about his next meal. He even began to dress better, though he never cared much for luxury. What mattered to him was being able to live with dignity and send something home to his mother. Still, Samuel never forgot the day he was rejected. Sometimes, when he walked home alone at night, he would think of that family, their cold faces, and their harsh words. It no longer hurt him the way it once did, but it stayed with him as a reminder. He promised himself never to treat anyone the way he had been treated. Life was slowly changing for Samuel. The city that once felt cold and unwelcoming now felt like a place where he could belong. He knew challenges would still come, but he also knew he had the strength to face them. What he didn't realize was that soon, life would bring him full circle. He would once again stand before the very family that had rejected him. But this time, he would not stand as a man carrying a suitcase and broken hopes. He would stand as a man whose true worth had finally been revealed to the world. The day came when Samuel's past and present collided in the most unexpected way. Harold had organized a business dinner to celebrate the company's new partnership with another firm. The event was being held at a luxurious hotel ballroom, filled with wealthy guests, important investors, and families of business leaders. Samuel, now a respected manager, had been invited not only to attend but to help Harold host the evening. He arrived dressed in a dark suit that fit him perfectly, his shoes polished, his tie neatly tied. His calm presence drew attention wherever he walked. As the night went on, Samuel moved through the crowd with ease, speaking politely to guests, making sure everything ran smoothly. Some of the younger staff looked at him with admiration, whispering to each other, "Can you believe he started as just an assistant? Look at him now." Samuel only smiled quietly and continued his work. Then, as he turned to greet a new group of arrivals, his heart skipped a beat. Walking into the ballroom was Claire, the woman he had once hoped to marry, with her parents by her side. They were guests of one of Harold's business partners. The moment their eyes fell on Samuel, shock spread across their faces. Her father froze, his glass nearly slipping from his hand. Her mother blinked rapidly, as if she were seeing a ghost. And Claire, her expression a mixture of surprise and regret, lowered her gaze. Samuel felt the memories flood back the cold living room, the harsh words, the rejection that had nearly broken him. But now, standing tall in the grand ballroom, he felt none of the shame he had once carried. Instead, he felt peace. He walked forward, extending his hand politely. "Good evening," he said softly, his voice steady. "It has been a long time." Claire's father stammered, "Samuel, what are you doing here?" Before Samuel could answer, Harold appeared beside him, smiling proudly. Placing a hand on Samuel's shoulder, Harold addressed the group. "Ah, I see you've met Samuel. This young man is one of my most trusted managers and a key reason behind our recent success. I wouldn't have this company running so smoothly without him." The room seemed to grow quieter as those words echoed. Claire's parents looked stunned, their eyes darting between Harold and Samuel. It was clear they had never imagined that the man they had once dismissed could one day be standing in such a position of honor. Samuel bowed his head slightly. "Thank you, sir," he said to Harold, then turned back to the family. "Life has a way of showing us who people really are. I hope you are well." Claire's mother opened her mouth but no words came out. Her father cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to regain his composure. Yes, we are well," he muttered. Claire, however, stepped forward. Her eyes glistened with unspoken emotion. "Samuel," she whispered, I am sorry. For everything." Samuel looked at her kindly. There was no anger in his eyes, no bitterness, only calm strength. "Claire," he said gently, "we all make choices. You chose your family that day, and I chose to walk away with my dignity. There is nothing to forgive." Her lips trembled, and she nodded, tears threatening to fall. She seemed smaller now, less certain, while Samuel stood taller than ever. Harold, sensing the tension, led Samuel away to introduce him to other guests. But throughout the evening, Claire's family could not take their eyes off him. They watched as people greeted him with respect, as executives listened to his ideas, as Harold treated him not just like an employee but like a son. Every smile Samuel received, every hand he shook, was a reminder of the mistake they had made. Later in the evening, Harold raised a glass to make a toast. "Tonight, we celebrate partnership, success, and most importantly, the value of character. I want to take a moment to recognize someone who has shown us all what true strength looks like. Samuel is proof that worth is not measured by appearance or background but by resilience, honesty, and integrity." To Samuel. The entire room lifted their glasses, voices ringing out together, "To Samuel." Samuel felt his chest tighten with emotion. He never sought praise, but in that moment, he knew he had not only survived, he had triumphed. He raised his glass humbly, smiling at the crowd. As the night ended, Samuel stepped outside into the cool air. The city lights sparkled around him. Harold joined him, placing an arm around his shoulder. "You've come a long way, Samuel. Do you realize what you've achieved? Samuel looked up at the night sky. I realize that rejection is not the end of a man. It is only a test. And I realize that kindness, even when the world turns cold, always finds its way back. Harold smiled. And that is why you are more than just an employee to me. You are family. Samuel's eyes grew wet, but he blinked back the tears. Thank you, sir. I will honor that always. In the days that followed, word spread about Samuel's story. People who had once whispered against him now spoke his name with admiration. Some even came to him for advice, not only about work but about life. He had become a symbol of hope for those who felt overlooked, a reminder that true worth cannot be hidden forever. And as for Claire and her parents, they carried the weight of their mistake quietly. They never again dared to look down on anyone for their background or skin. Whenever they saw Samuel at future gatherings, they greeted him with respect. But Samuel never carried pride or arrogance in those moments, he only carried grace. His journey from rejection to recognition had been long and painful, but it had shaped him into a man who knew his value. He no longer needed anyone's approval to feel worthy. He had built his place in the world, and nothing could take that away. That night, as Samuel walked home, he thought of his mother back in his homeland. He thought of her words, the ones that had kept him strong in his darkest hours: carry your heart with you. People may not see your value, but never forget it yourself. He smiled softly, whispering into the night, you were right, Mother. They see it now. But even if they never had, I would still know who I am. The city around him buzzed with life, but Samuel walked in peace, knowing that his story was no longer one of rejection. It was a story of dignity, of resilience, and of a man whose true worth had finally been revealed.